who are you without those accomplishments? Who are you without those possessions? Who are you without those identities? And to be able to respond quickly and to be able to know who we are without them is powerful. The key to live a life of freedom is to live from the nobodiness and to become somebody without being attached to it.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Vibrant Soul Society, The Conversations. Our mission here is to help you discover that you are greater than your negative thoughts. And beyond our negative thoughts is our true self, or you could say our vibrant soul. So today we are very blessed and privileged to have a great guest with us to help us with our mindset. So Yuki, welcome to the Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Yes, so welcome. So for people that are unfamiliar with Yuki, how would you describe yourself?
Well, that's a very good question that I have two different answers to it. And when we really understand, the vibrant soul that you're talking about, my answer would be I am. And that's it, right? Because whatever that we say after that is an identity, which is a mental construct that is temporary. So that is my first answer, right? The second answer would be I see myself as a guide and a messenger to share my truth so people can wake up to their truth. And the reason that I say that intentionally is I'm aware of the difference between the ultimate absolute truth that exists in the world and the relative truth, which is based on your desire, perception, that what's true for you. And then I think, I share my message to the world. And I always say this though, that the goal is not for me to convince anybody with my point of view, but to help people stimulate their point of view to possibly expand for them to serve their fulfillment of the desire, because that's what we are here to create an experience. So I am is the first answer, and then I am a guide, a messenger would be my second answer to your one.
Yes, I'm just really curious. Before you were this guide, this messenger, what took you to that point? What was your human experience that led you to that realization?
Yeah, I love that question, and I have probably 10 different versions of it. I currently reside in San Francisco Bay Area. I'm originally from Tokyo, Japan, and I was raised by two artists who are remarkably free-spirited. And I actually grew up in South America, Peru. So some people might hear my Spanish accent. And I think for me, what I remember is the drastical change that I experienced when I was little, because I was living in Peru from 2 to 11. And I went back to Tokyo when I was 11. So I moved among two different continents, culture, and I did not develop a fixed identity of which country, culture I absolutely belong to, right? But not just belonging, but I really felt like I was fluid and more than that. Yeah. So I think I was outside of the box, per se, of either of the culture. And I was feeling certain about this more than the physical, visible world. So I kind of knew it from early childhood, actually. If I tell you a milestone that I remember, I discovered a book when I was 16, 17. That was the time that I started to actually dance, which became my first career in Tokyo. But I explored book after book to sort of understand this spiritual stuff that I, for the longest time, felt like I was exploring on my own. And I didn't know that others were thinking about, but I read somehow was writing about it. So Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield was the very first book that I encountered when I was 17. And then right next to that, there was a Neil Donald Walsh book, Conversation with God.
Mm.
And he was just publishing the first one. And I was waiting for the next one, waiting for the next one. And I read them all when he was publishing. So that was like a pivotal moment of entering into the different, level of deepening my spiritual.
That's really interesting where you had these two different cultures that you didn't really have this fixed identity. It's more like fluid identity. Like it's almost like you're in this point, like, who am I? I see all these different cultures. And you were starting to explore, like, who am I really? And you were starting to read these books that were maybe starting to give you some nuggets into your divine essence.
Yeah. I was craving those information. Like when I went to university in Tokyo, I didn't really study. I wasn't interested in what the academia was teaching, but I was going to a bookstore after and I was immersed in just staying there 3, 4, 5 hours, reading, reading, and reading. It was nourishing my soul for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure when you're doing all that reading, did you learn anything that talked about any of these practices like meditation, mindfulness, yoga, or you just were reading at this point?
That's a good question, actually. Nobody has asked me that question. I wasn't into yoga back then. I wasn't doing meditation either. I was intrigued by the information and I was collecting data, I think. I didn't get into practices like mindfulness or meditation until later.
At this point, you were just absorbing knowledge, but you weren't having the direct experience.
Internally, I was walking the journey of spirituality. Externally, I was pursuing a career as a professional dancer in Tokyo. And that led me to move to Los Angeles. And I had a bulging disc, so I needed to give up dance. But then it's a natural tendency for dancers to move into Pilates. Then I think that sort of blended a little bit the spiritual interest and the movement, and I started to go within through movement. Yeah. So yoga is something that I have done, but then Pilates movement was a natural transition as a dancer because Pilates can be a dance conditioning. But then the way that I was approaching Pilates was much, much more internal exploration instead of mechanical movement, if that makes sense. So the movement became a form of practice and mindfulness for me. And then it is still.
You're learning to be present when you're doing Pilates and that inner work. Your practice was learning to be present. A lot of people weren't even aware of that. If you're just living in this world that you're not really, may not be present at this moment, that you were not really fully aware. So maybe the first presence practice that you had that was really taking you inward. So maybe that data was making more sense at that point.
Yeah. And like when I was going through the training to become, I became a Pilates teacher eventually. And it was so easy for me. Like it was just dancing on the machine. And a lot of people were asking me, how did you remember all of this? Like I was just having fun, right? So I think because of my background as having practicing a lot of choreography in the past from dance, allow me to focus on inside because I wasn't focusing on the actual movement, but how I felt inside.
Internally monitoring what's going on. That's still developing that awareness, that presence. We were talking about this before was you're helping people with their sole purpose now, what they're really here for, what, we get so caught up in this human experience that we forget, like, why are we really here? And I know you probably learned that from a lot from Neil Donald Walsh. I know he talks a lot about that with his conversations with God, like, why are we really here? So how do you see soul purpose?
It's interesting that you are saying that because I think I was really into movement and the body, and I was interested in the mind, and I was interested in health. And when you explore body and mind, you sort of move into exploring soul and spirit. And then I came idea of mind because I have come to realize that everything in the dimension of the body, including my own body and the physical world, is a reflection, right? It gives us a feedback. And soul and the body just are. The mind is the bridge that sort of communicates between the two dimensions. For me, that's the way in which I interpret it. And I think purpose is something that people seems to be looking for to find the meaning. Like a lot of people tell me, I don't know what my purpose is, or something feels missing, or there feels like there's more to life, the sense of emptiness inside. And that's usually when people ask me, I don't know what my purpose is, almost 100% of the time, they're looking for the vehicle in which they can express freely. But then the answer to that is if you're here, you're already on and with purpose. Yeah. And the question of why intrigued me. Like, why is this way? Why is this way? So I think I love the initial introduction of this podcast that you share, beyond the negative thoughts, right? So, like, if you think of purpose from the dimension of the mind, you continue to look for it because it's not in that space. But when you realize that you're more than the mind because you can observe your thoughts and you can observe the dimension of the mind, you will feel connected and you will find yourself not looking for any purpose. So I think acts that connectivity, like people, it's interesting though, because I also teach meditation and then I tell people, okay, navigate your attention and also the body's position to look for a place that you feel connected, right? And I say that, and people seems to understand what I mean, even though I never say what you need to connect to, right? What is that connection? It's a sensation and feeling. So I think internally we all know that bigger picture of it, but we pretend not to, and being in the dimension of the mind. So I guess your question is, the purpose and the soul's purpose. Yeah, going beyond the mind and then under why humans are ending up thinking negative thoughts. Those are contrast, right? Because we live in the relative realm. We have polarity, right? Positive and negative, darkness and light, pain and pleasure. So, and then we are a spiritual being, and also we are also wearing a cloth of biological body. So the biology is designed to experience survival. That's the fundamental instinct for the body. Negative thoughts are coming from that survival part of us, and we are not that body. So to be aware of that, and then when we practice living that way, you will find aligning automatically with the purpose.
Mm.
How I would phrase it.
Yeah, so it's a really important thing you mentioned here. When you mentioned that you were asking, like, why is this? Why is that? Just asking the why question, the skill of curiosity. That's what
Yeah,
you led to the book. You had this natural curiosity. And that's what I see, that curiosity allows change to come in. If you're not asking why and diving deeper, nothing really changes.
exactly. Curiosity is the openness to, stop resisting against life, right? You cannot be curious and judgmental at the same time. So, how can you sustain that state of curiosity? That's something that I recommend to my clients very often, though, because they're people who, the mind wants to do three things, right? It wants to describe, compare, and have an opinion about something. And people suffer from them, right? So, but then if you practice observing your inner dialogue with the sense of curiosity, you cannot try to have an opinion at the same time. So that's truly the gateway to rise above the mental construct.
Right. I really like that word you use there, the openness. Openness allows new possibilities because I was very sick with all these diagnoses. I really didn't have like an openness to explore the other ways. In a way, it became my diagnosis. What did they said, oh, you're bipolar? I'm bipolar. You have multiple sclerosis? Oh, I have multiple sclerosis. Like I became that identity. So I didn't have the openness until I found meditation to see, oh, all this stuff is just information.
Question opens the door, sentence closes it, right? So
Yeah.
you can have an affirmation of defining yourself with something, but then that can potentially close the next layer of possibilities. So keeping the sentence in question is super powerful. And that's why coaching is very effective.
Right.
Yeah.
This all comes back to what you were saying in the beginning. Anything after the I am is the mental construct. So it's all about remembering, going back to the I am.
Yeah. So one of the interesting practice is that, let's say if we're living in this 3D physical world, and the language that we use to communicate is our five senses, right? So we can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Now, if this is a podcast, people probably are listening to. So hearing, right? That's how people are creating their experience internally through that five sensory perception. Now, that's an outward focus. Now, if we go to inward focus, now we can observe our thoughts, we can observe our feeling, we can observe our emotion, we can sense the belief that we're in, the identity, we can feel our intention inside. And whoever that is that's observing is the I, right? The I amness of it, right? So if you give a name to that, now it becomes a concept in the mind because the mind wants to conceptualize things. So that's why people like to know what it is. If I say like a mixed movement, people think, oh, what's that? Is that a yoga or Pilates? You know, people want to know what it is in order for them to feel safe. So, you know, we have an identity and the role that we play in the world, and being somebody feels safe, right? Being nobody is so fearful for people, but that's who we are essentially. And being nobody is basically it's a death for the ego, right? That's why it's fearful for the mind, for the ego self. But I think truly though, the key to live a life of freedom is to live from the nobodiness and to become somebody, but without being attached to it.
It's very deep. To be nobody, to be somebody.
Yeah, we can become somebody all the time, right? Because we cannot live this in this realm without any thinking, without any emotion, without any doing and having, right? This physical world consists of having something or doing something. But then if we define ourselves, the essence of who we are through having and doing, we will forever be attached to those, even though none of them is who we are. Like a completely letting go of the ownership, even of our own bodies, because we don't own our bodies. We are temporarily renting. So can we live from that place to feel absolutely free and then having fun, construct that somebody so we can use that identity to serve and touch the world is the ultimate way of life for me.
Yeah. I love that. That we get so addicted, I guess is the right word, to having and doing. And that really keeps this attachment strong. Would you say that? The more having and doing you have, the more you get attached to that?
Yeah, because then, I mean, sometimes, for instance, let's say if somebody's building a successful business, right? And the identity might not be in the thing that the person is creating, but the ability to be able to create. Then, if the person loses that, that person can recreate something else, probably. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're attached to that thing, but you are definitely attached to that identity of being able to create something. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's just a matter of not to be controlled by it. You know,
Yeah, that's really the key is most people are controlled by it, that they're not really fully present here to this moment, we're just going through the motions.
right, right, right. Different practices that we do, but one of them is like, for instance, let's say, we have this biographical self, right? That the life that we have lived and things that we accomplish, things that we have or have done in the past. Each decade, we kind of select 3 to 4 items. And then those are the milestone and accomplishment. And then you ask, who are you without them? Who are you without those accomplishments? Who are you without those possessions? Who are you without those identities? And to be able to respond quickly and to be able to know who we are without them is powerful, because then you might be, if we are not anchored in that, we probably more than likely are chasing the next identity, right?
Yeah, that's really it. The mind loves to chase.
Yeah.
It just wants to chase, 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 chase. So when you're working with your clients, how do you help them break their attachments or maybe stop the chasing?
Yeah. I mean, we do different practices though. And then one of the things that I like doing is, I mean, we can do meditation, right? We can have different practices, but then I think one thing that's missing is the integration of it, right? How do we show up that way? Like, for instance, when somebody meditates and get out of the meditation, you feel more expansive, you feel more connected, you feel much bigger than about yourself than how you have been feeling. Now, how can we stay there when in the midst of traffic, right? How can we stay there when we encounter the person that triggers the most? Those are the real practice that we want to implement, because often the pattern is that, okay, this is the 3D reality that we experience. And then we get triggered and then we do the things that we are accustomed to do. And then we turn our way to do our spiritual practice, right? And then we come back to the 3D reality to react again the same way. And then we go back to hide ourselves to do our spiritual practice, right? So I think to identify what is causing us to create that internal experience, and in that moment, let's say something happens again, how can we respond differently is what we want to practice. So we do practice the nobodiness in with my clients. I do that very often. And not to be attached doesn't mean that you're not working on producing the result, right? But then we can expect that and create that enthusiasm. But the attachment, whenever we're attached to, we have that experience because there's a fear involved. There's no
Mm.
attachment without fear. So then the practice becomes, okay, how can we come from the place of love? Because when we are immerse ourselves in love, fear is not there. So creating from the place of love and sustaining that frequency are the things that we practice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really an important topic, the integration, like how we move off the meditation mat and into, our daily life. And it just reminds me of Eckhart Tolle talks about if you think you're enlightened, go live with your parents.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the best practice, right? So we want to embrace contrast and something that appears to be negative, and including the negative thoughts that you mentioned. If your audience are sort of feeling, anybody who is feeling stuck with the negative thoughts, here's a little tip though, because being able to observe is the first step to change, because if you are not aware of what's happening, you cannot change it. And here's a little key though, because I found that people practice noticing their negative thoughts while it's happening. And I have witnessed a pattern in people judging themselves about the fact that they're experiencing negative thoughts. But the moment you judge the negative thoughts, you're double negative right there, right? So that's why, as I said, observe with the sense of curiosity is so important, because you cannot be curious and judgmental at the same time. So to stay in the state of curiosity and observe, and to be okay observing, that is the key.
Right. It's definitely an important key because when I'm working with individuals, you want to let go of all judgment, all criticism, because it's going to keep the mind in this loop and loop and loop. And we just want to stop the loop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's really interesting. We were talking about this too, about we want to create or work from a place of love. How do we get people there when they're so encased in this fear or they can't even accept themselves? How do we get them out of this place of fear and where they can't accept themselves into a place of love?
Yeah. So, I mean, depending on what that person is actually going through, right? But we just ask simple, different questions, right? So let's say if somebody is in a state of fear and being attached to it, we ask the question, what is making you attached there? Where the resistance is coming from? And often though, it's just a pattern that we have lived. It's a habitual pattern that we have lived. Although, so many people in the world are dealing with this sense of unworthiness, right? Sense of self that they feel not worthy enough. And that can drive a lot of the behaviors, unwanted behavior. So we do want to shed light on that to become aware of it. But then all the personality and the identities are temporary, dynamic and fluid, so we can change it. Only because you have been reacting to something for the last 20 years, that doesn't need to be you today. This is something that Carl Jung said, right? You are not what happened to you, you are who you choose to become. So it's one thing to believe that, oh, I've been dealing with this for a long time, 20 years. It's going to take a long time to change. It's up to us. During pandemic that I did a little 21 days challenge. I don't believe in taking 21 days to change anything. Because if you believe that you can change now, you are already changed in a nanosecond. So it's just a choice of the present moment and then staying in that version. Change happens in 1 second. That's what I believe.
Yeah, change absolutely does happen in 1 second. Because my own personal journey was asking myself the question, who am I? And I was just sitting with that after I realized I wasn't my thoughts. I was sitting with that question, well, if not my thoughts, who am I? And I just heard a voice say, perfect spirit. I'm like, that's it. My spirit is perfect, simply the body and mind that are damaged. And I just knew all is well, and all sense of fear about my health was simply gone. I knew it was all over. And that was in a second.
Yeah, amazing.
I think that's where really coaches really can come into play because you're talking about these habitual patterns. Some people aren't even aware that they're trapped in a pattern. So how do you get them to see that this is a pattern and how do you break it for them?
Yeah. And one powerful information that people can have is the ego thrives surviving. So a part of us wants to change, but our subconscious wants to stay the same because you feel like somebody and that somebody feels familiar.
Yeah, that's right. The subconscious is all about keeping you safe. Change is the unknown that we're talking about before, the nobody, the undefined.
Right. Ego does not like that. And to become somebody else, you might get motivated to sort of become great, and then your subconscious is so married to the familiar version of us. So most people decide to make a change not until the pain is severe, whatever the pain might be. The cost of not living your life the way that you can express yourself fully is the most expensive one. So how can we lean into that?
Right. Because we have to realize if you're not living your life, to realize that time is not finite. We only have a certain amount of time and we don't know how much we're given. If you're not living your life, what can you do to change things? Start
Yeah.
asking questions.
And then to be surrounded by people who are in the new version, right? Because proximity matters. Your identity is not limited to yourself, but the surrounding that you are in is part of your identity. So you want to be with people who either have or demonstrating what you want to demonstrate by that.
That's really good. You want to be around the right influences to make those change because it's really hard to be making that change if everyone's keeping you held back. It reminds me a little bit of like crabs pulling each other back into the
Uh-huh.
bucket. They don't want you to escape. They want you to keep you in that pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big fan of changing within, but also around as well, the actual environment. You
Hmm.
sandwich it from both directions.
Right, right. To reinforce it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're talking a little bit before this that you have a group one school for sole purpose. So we didn't really get into that. Can you dive into it a little bit about what your group is and how that helps people?
Yeah, I created this group not too long ago. The main objective of this group is to help people live a life aligned embodiment of the soul alignment. I'm a huge fan of embodiment, which is different from collecting information because people know a lot today, but they're not living what they know. So living exactly what you know is embodiment. So if anybody who is interested in embodying, creating and living the life aligned with what the soul is here to do, I think we have created a great community. The people from all over the world. And we are building a culture of circulation and giving. I learned from Neil Donald Walsh. And if you have something that you want more of, begin giving. People are seeking more. It could be more love, it could be more money, it could be more health. If you have something that you want to receive more of from life, give that thing that you want more of so you can initiate that law of circulation. So all the activities inside of the group encourage people to be a part of the circulation. It's
Mm.
amazing though, when you start, the group is not just for people to receive educational stuff. I want people to participate because if people are not expressing and participating, you're not moving energy in your life. People want more, but what I want people to understand is that to receive and have more, you want to begin giving first because that's the fundamental universal law. The reason for that is when you start giving, the source will know that if it gives to you, you will circulate more. So you're simply, that's one of the purpose, right? Aligning with that cosmic intention. So people will get a lot out of just joining and participating because the whole mechanism inside of the group and culture is inspired by that idea. And inside of the Soul Purpose group, I have a 5-day Soul Purpose Ascension workshop that I encourage people to go through to deepen the understanding and awareness of ascending into the purpose of the soul.
Yeah, I love that concept of moving energy, that we constantly want to move energy, keep it circulating. It's always those stories that we hear about abundance. If you're hanging on to that last dollar that you have, you're not allowing more to come in because you're attached to that one. You're not moving energy.
Yeah. All the stagnance and disintegration happens by not releasing energy. People tend to wait to be given, but why don't we give first?
Yeah, I love that concept to give first, just to keep giving all this love, and the universe will deliver back to you because you're just moving energy. So you don't get it stuck. You're caught up in negative thoughts. You're just stuck in energy. You're not moving it.
Yeah, exactly.
This has been a really enjoyable conversation. So, Yuki, so if people had questions, how would they reach out to you?
I think the two best places, I do have an Instagram, which is my full name, YukiYoshii. There are two eyes. You'll see my photos immediately. And I think where I like to invite people is the school group. So Soul Purpose School is a great place for people to join and connect and then, participate in this circulation. And things will start changing once you start participating in the circulation.
That's great. So, thank you for joining us in the conversations. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Yuki.
Thank you so much, Howard. Thank you.